Mid-20th century America. The nation is locked in, and all in, with the space race during the Cold War. The mysteries that lie in the vast reaches of space is not only exciting for Americans, but also influencing the culture around them. From film, television, books, and even advertisements, what was once science fiction is now becoming a reality. The influence in music was no exception. This is Space Age Pop, a futuristic era. Space Age Pop, or bachelor pad music, came from the Space Age period in America, which was an era of military, political, scientific, and technological developments. Like I said, Americans were all in on the space race, which, if you don't know, was a race between the United States and the Soviet Union to see who could get to the moon first. Spoiler alert, the US won. But ultimately, this race resulted in rapid advances in science, rocketry, and even materials. Some of the technology we found additional uses for later, such as memory foam. Space Age Pop is an interesting style of music that blends together jazz, exotica, and lounge music. Artists used to combine futuristic sound effects with groovy rhythms that would pair up amazingly with an outer space album cover, and the result would be a journey through the cosmos for listeners. Even if some artists weren't all in on the space age, they knew they couldn't let a massive fad pass them up. Many artists of this era would include space elements in not only the sounds of the music, but also the album artworks. Russ Garcia's Into Space would have a claymation Earth with what appears to be sound waves surrounding it on his album Fantastica, Music from Outer Space. The Amos brothers had them standing on what appears to be a moon with a rocket ship in the background on their album Destination Moon. One of my favorite album covers that I discovered was Les Baxter's Space Escapade. To me, this cover perfectly showcases a somewhat cheesy extent artists would go to showcase their interpretation of the future, in a time where space and technology was full of mysteries and possibilities. This futuristic era wouldn't be what it was if it wasn't for the pioneers that helped shape it. Known as the king of Space Age Pop, Juan Garcia Esquivel is a well-known frontrunner for this genre. Self-taught instrumentalist, composer, and arranger, Esquivel was considered a prodigy. 1960s Infinity in Sound was considered his best body of work. Esquivel was known for perfecting the composition of a song and use of stereo recording. He would have two bands recording at the same time in separate studios. The end result would be a mixture of sounds alternating between the left and right audio channels to create a perfect soundscape. A perfect example is heard on his hit song, Mucha Muchacha. If I had to pick one song to represent this era, then it would definitely be Telstar by the Tornadoes. This song topped the charts in 1962. Written and produced by Joe Meek, who is another pioneer of this era, Telstar embodies a futuristic melody that many consider to be ahead of its time. Many artists of this era had to challenge themselves musically, whether it was experimenting with sounds not considered popular, or even challenging the conservative mentality of record labels. Many artists had to quickly capture this fad. Some found success, others didn't. Some artists weren't appreciated until much later in their careers. Even though Esquivel was considered the king to some, critics often had negatives to say for his early work. Esquivel died on January 3, 2002, but he was glad he got to see the new millennium and the shifting musical landscape. He was quoted as saying, "Perhaps the fact is that my music was too much for the time. The audience wasn't ready for that type of music. Now they are used to the sounds and the technology. I'm glad the young artists are trying to follow my style of writing. I love that." In the late 1960s, the musical landscape started to shift. Bands like the Beatles were starting to take the world by storm, and Space Age Pop was declining. However, the influence this futuristic era had can be heard in some of today's artists. Artists like the High Llamas and Stereolab draw heavy inspiration from Space Age Pop and bachelor pad music. Even though Space Age Pop isn't as prominent today, artists and listeners continue to explore its unique sounds, and thanks to the internet, some of the lost songs can find the new audience in the modern era. Are there any unique musical eras you guys would like for me to explore? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.